Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Tooele Happy Hour, where if Head Trauma had a podcast, it might sound like this. Your guest, Rob McNealy from the TUSC Network, and your host, Jared Anderson and David Weiss. Let's kick it off. Rob, can you introduce yourself, please?
I can, but do I have to?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
tell us
I'm Rob
and tell
McNealy.
us about TUSC too.
Okay, co-founder of TUSC, which is just an NFT and cryptocurrency platform. We are focused on actually solving problems. We've never hyped our project. We've never sold anybody any crypto. We're actually trying to use the technology for good instead of evil, which is seems like what many of these crypto projects are doing these days. I'm a serial entrepreneur, live in Salt Lake City, Utah area. Kind of focus on just trying to live my life and help other people. But I think crypto and blockchain technologies will either be used for liberating people or they're going to be used for enslaving people, depending on where it goes. So I think we're at an interesting crossroads technologically, and the dystopian part of me is, concerned that we're losing the proper direction with cryptocurrencies in general. And I think this FTX thing is, kind of just emblematic of what's happening out there.
So
Let's start from the beginning.
yeah, let's lay out what happened with FTX.
Where'd they come from? Who are they? And how did we get here?
Well, that's kind of all right. So FTX and its sister company Alameda Research are a cryptocurrency. So FTX is a cryptocurrency exchange that's mostly been an offshore entity. And they had a trading division, I guess is the way to call it, called Alameda Research, which was going out there and actually investing and trading cryptocurrencies. The crypto was founded by a gentleman, like a 30-year-old guy named Sam Bankman-Fried, and his co-founder in the Alameda Research, or I should say the CEO, but she was one of the early, like with Carolyn Ellison. They both come from very prestigious academic families. So Sam Bankman-Fried's family are very well-connected Stanford professors, and they are very active in the Democratic National Party as fundraisers and bundlers. And I think even Sam Bankman-Fried's mother had close ties to Hillary Clinton. So it's very, very well connected. About starting a couple weeks ago, the first part of November, it came to light that it melted down, and all the evidence has shown so far that it looks like they were going out and just committing massive levels of fraud. They were pulling every type of fraud you can imagine. They were lying about their assets and using that for collateral. They were making up tokens that had no value, using them for collateral. They were getting loans under false pretenses, and then gambling them essentially on really high risky bets. They then started stealing depositors' funds. So on their exchange, and then gambling them through their Alameda Research trading arm. And they made a bunch of bets. They lost. And then when crypto started melting down from other risky ventures, it kind of undervalued some of their liquidity. And then when the CEO of the Binance exchange, who kind of understood where the bodies were buried, just kind of let people know that there's bodies, and then they had a massive liquidity withdrawal, meaning that depositors tried to get out as much money as they could out of their accounts, and that created essentially a run on the bank, exposing their fraud. Where it gets complicated is that Sam Bankman-Fried had donated tens of millions of dollars to the Democratic National Committee and various campaigns over the last two election cycles. In addition, there is some overlap between they were handling crypto donations going to the Ukraine. And so there's been a lot of rumor, there's been a lot of conspiracy theory that taxpayer money that was earmarked for the Ukraine for rebuilding got invested at FTX and or laundered through FTX and funneled into political candidates on the left. There's not a lot to substantiate that that's what's happening, but for all intents and purposes, what we're finding now is that they had no internal accounting controls as an organization. They had very, very detailed organizations for shell companies all over the planet, over 100 entities that they controlled. So you have on one hand, a very elaborate accounting system or no accounting system in play, but they had a very elaborate tax shelter system. And I don't believe that was by accident. It was by design, because when you have poor accounting controls, it's hard to kind of track the fraud that people are doing. And so we don't have a way to prove or disprove, at least right now, that there was a direct conspiracy between taxpayer dollars going to Ukraine and money being funneled through FTX for political purposes. But since there isn't accounting controls, we do know this, is that money that went into there was money going to and from FTX and to the Ukraine, and money going to Democratic national candidates. And since we don't have good controls that we can look at our accounting system right now, it's looking like it was a money laundering operation. And then to top it off, because Carolyn Ellison, also her father was an MIT professor in economics, has ties to the Securities Exchange Commission. Sam Bankman-Fried, or SBF as we call him, has testified in front of Congress. He was buying, they were lobbying heavily. They got major celebrity endorsements, Tom Brady and Giselle and, a bunch of other people. And so it's turning out to be a giant mess with a lot of very powerful people having egg on their face. And the stunning thing that's happened, especially over the last couple days, is the reporting from the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and New York Times, and some of these other, they're all left-wing media outlets. It's all puff pieces. They're all talking about he was just in over his head. It was just in over, it was all like he had good intentions and he was a philanthropist and wanted to help the world, but made a little boo-boo. When this is like, one of the biggest frauds in human history. And so it's interesting. What a lot of us are believing is that the mainstream that were covering this are either trying to cover their own earlier reporting of FTX or are just completely captured at this point, and they're spinning the narrative now because of the left-leaning political connections and how this might embarrass the politicians on the left. I think that's a good summary.
Rob, when you say this is the biggest of all time situations for this kind of a disaster, what kind of numbers are we looking for financially?
We know the numbers keep changing because, again, they don't have good accounting, but the gentleman who took over as the CEO after they just filed bankruptcy, and they got the guy who handled the Enron scandal after Ken Lay got removed. So they have that same guy, and he's saying this is the worst. Basically, it's the most corrupt internal organization he's ever seen, essentially. But so far, the numbers are changing a little bit, but it's above $10 billion at this point.
Wow. That's like 1/3 of the money we sent to Ukraine one time.
Yeah. And so I don't have strong, no one has evidence of this yet, and how strong the flows going to Ukraine were coming and going. That's what we don't know yet. We do have strong evidence of money outflowing from FTX to politicians. Now, the question is if they were stealing user funds. So even if the money didn't come from the Ukraine, because we don't have that link yet, there's just, people are like always wanting to put the conspiracy together and just make those assumptions. I'm not ready to make the assumption yet. But what we do know is that given the tens of millions of dollars that went to candidates, it's possible, if they have poor controls on the internal accounting systems like it's claimed, that depositors' money may have been stolen and laundered or embezzled for that purpose, which is equally as bad or almost as bad. And so this is where it's like, without having good accounting systems, it's hard to really do like the forensic audits they need to do to really determine this money went this way and this money went that way. And I think this is where it gets a little more complicated than, because it's crypto, is because the wallets don't have names right? It's just wallet addresses where things are going. If these were in different business bank accounts, like it's easier to look at the inflows and outflows to a bank account. And trace that back. It's a little harder to know internally which wallets were owned by which entity, because the only way you would know that is if you have an accounting system on the inside that would dedicate that. If you say, I'm going to set up 100 business entities and I'm going to have 100 wallets for each, one wallet for each crypto for each one of those, you might have hundreds of wallets there, but you'd have to account for that in a system. And so far, it looks like they weren't doing a very good job of that.
So when you say depositors' money being stolen, you mean like the depositor, the guy who thinks he's using an exchange, leaves his crypto in the exchange, and he thinks it's there whenever he wants to retrieve it. But really what you're saying is the exchange takes that crypto as soon as they receive it, and then they start utilizing it in their schemes, correct?
Correct. And what I want to point out is that this is not a crypto problem, right? Like this would be equivalent if, say, you have a 401k. So let's say you have a Fidelity or a Schwab account, right? It would be like if Fidelity took your money and then gambled it over here and then lost it. it's equivalent of that.
Yeah, that
right?
or if Fidelity said, we're gonna sponsor these Democrat PACs with your money instead of investing it in returnable.
The thing is, it's illegal in almost every country in the world for any kind of investment house or trading house to take users' funds and, one, use it as collateral, or two, spend it. That's like banking finance 101. You cannot do that unless you are giving the money over to them for that express purpose. But this is theft. This is straight up fraud, theft, deceit at so many levels. And I want people to understand that this is not because it's crypto or crypto is a scam that this happened. These people just violated every possible quote unquote banking law there is, even in the Bahamas. And so this is not a crypto problem. This could have, this happens with dollar stuff all the time. You have these banks doing funny business and you have companies doing weird accounting. But in this case, it wasn't a crypto problem. This could have been done with a bank could do this. For instance, a bank could do the same kind of stuff. Yeah. So the fact that it's cryptocurrency almost doesn't matter. It just complicates it a little bit. But it's looking really, really bad. And the media around it is what's really galling right now. It's appalling. It's awful. They're literally treating him like he's just a good kid, tried to do good stuff, and he did nothing wrong. It's not his fault. He just made a mistake. It's like, no, these people were like literally organized criminals doing massive embezzlement of users' funds. They're destroying the lives of at least 1 million depositors and investors.
Aren't they trying to blame it on this girlfriend of his now, saying she did all of it maliciously?
Well, it usually is her fault, right, Jared?
So this is the interesting thing. Sam Bankman-Fried, he's like still tweeting. Here's the other thing. None of them have been arrested yet. And this has been a couple weeks in the making. If this was normal, like a normal scenario, these people would have been in cuffs. They're not been arrested, which is fascinating. But Sam Bankman-Fried's been tweeting and talking to reporters and doing all this like asinine stuff, whereas Caroline Ellison is gone. No one knows where she is. She's not in communication. I think she's smarter. She's not talking, but she's gone. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a fall guy and it's not going to be Sam Bankman-Fried.
He's the connected person that's going to be protected, or what?
You have to ask yourself why being one of this will end up being so far the biggest crypto scam in history to date. But why is he in jail? Why is he still talking to people? Why is he still spinning a narrative? Why is the media, trying to set the stage like, he wasn't this mastermind criminal or anything like that. He's just a dumb kid who made mistakes when the guy's literally a genius. I think that's what's telling. I would be surprised, and maybe I'm a little jaded, but I think because he is so politically connected. I mean, he's on stage with like Bill Clinton, his mom's buddy with Hillary Clinton. His mom's one of this huge fundraiser, organizing all these other academics on the West Coast of all these Democratic, fund, is this big Democratic fundraiser. They're very, very, very politically connected. And so there's no other way to explain the fact that one, he's not in jail, and two, the media is just painting him as this darling angel who's just made a little boo-boo. So yeah, I'm a little cynical right now that he's going to get off, or at least get off really, really light.
Does he stay in the Bahamas, or is he actually on mainland USA?
They were living in a $40 million penthouse condo at an exclusive resort. And apparently his family and some of the other bigwigs that's one of the other things. They bought real estate with those funds too. So they were buying out of the money. Let's just call it, imagine they just had one big pot of money and they spend it any way they want.
They
bought stuff.
They went into the vault as the bank manager and withdrew stacks of bills when they
whatever they want. So they want. So so apparently his Sam Bankman-Fried's family has hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate on the island right now. So they were, it's interesting. They were trying to position him before as this, like, I want to change the world kind of guy. And he was supposedly driving around in a Toyota Corolla, and come to find out he's living in a $40 million penthouse.
So they tried making him look like, what's that super rich guy in Ohio? Dang it. The big investor guy.
He was an environmentalist, if I remember.
They're trying to make him look like, what's that super wealthy investor guy?
There's a few of them.
There's a few of them.
Well, what's the
Give me a clue.
Name the bit. I'm asking you guys for the clue because my mind's blank right now.
I don't know what's in your head.
The Koch brothers.
No, the name the big investor
George Soros.
No, the one, he lives in Ohio. I think Ohio. Yeah, Ohio.
Buffett?
Yeah, Buffett.
He lives in Nebraska.
Or Nebraska. There's a difference.
There's a big difference.
It's the same state.
It's not the same state.
Yeah, sure it is.
It's not.
Sure it is.
It's not.
But anyways, they always showed him that he drives the same Buick that he drove 25 years ago whenever they show him. I remember watching something on that.
Yeah.
But I believe that's probably legit. Understand? Maybe. He still lives in the same house that he's been there. He's been in the same house for like 40 years in Omaha. I lived in Omaha for a while. And yeah, he actually is known to be a legit frugal guy.
You lived in Omaha and you're telling me Nebraska is different than Ohio? You were there. You witnessed it.
Very different. But I spent a lot of time in Ohio too, so I can talk about this. I think, Warren Buffett is he's been shown to be legit for a long time.
But that's what I'm saying. They're trying to show this Freed guy like him. They're trying to endear him to the common man.
Yeah. And so ultimately, it was all show. It was all projection. Now, what we don't know was this a was this a scam? Some kind of graft from the beginning? Was this always the intention, or did it get out of hand, or what? We don't know. And I think we may never know. I wouldn't be surprised if we never know the truth at this point, given again the political connections and the money we're talking and the people that have political egg on their face at this point. I'm not sure we're ever going to know the truth. And that's sad.
Do you think this, so what you're saying is this might have been from the get-go, political cover to funnel money back into the Democrat Party?
Possibly. You have to remember, these guys came out of nowhere.
Well,
they came out of...
Yeah, and if I was looking at it, if it dealt with a lot of stuff in Ukraine and we didn't have any controls over the money we sent there, and then Ukrainian money flowed through, that's the easiest way to launder money is we got to send it to this war zone for humanity. And then, 5-10% gets peeled off and comes back to you.
Well, can't they do chain analytics on these transactions from that exchange?
Well, here's the thing, like they can try if you know the starting and end, if depending on the blockchain, right? Because they were dealing with many different blockchains on top of that. So it also depends if you know the starting point and the ending point. Like even with public blockchains that are not privacy based, the only way you're going to figure it out is if you know if you know one address, the beginning wallet address, but you don't know where the ending one is or who owns that other address. It's hard to like track that down. You can look at the transactions, but you may not know who controls the wallets, and that's kind of the problem here. So here's the thing: when it comes to investing, it's mostly legal to do this, by the way, too. But when you advertise a guaranteed rate of return and then top it off with no risk, that's inherently a red flag for any investment, whether it's crypto, dollars, anything. Anybody promises you an investment with a guaranteed rate of return, that's pretty much illegal. And why that is, because there's only certain types of securities that you're legally allowed to market that way. But then when you tell people there's no risk, that also is generally a scam. And so this is a big red flag. And it's not just crypto. People do this with dollars. And this is why. People want to believe that they can make money from investments for other people with no risk. And this is like, if you look at almost every Ponzi scheme out there, that's the pitch. The pitch is you can make money. There's no risk to you. Just give us the money and we'll make you rich. That's almost every single investment scam ever. And why this is, it shortcuts the lazy part of the human brain or the greedy part of the brain. People want to believe it. And so they fall for that. They're susceptible to that marketing. So the government actually regulates how you can market things. So when FTX was first going out and starting to try to get people to give them money to invest, they were promising in their first pamphlets, I think this is going back about 3.5, 4 years ago, they were promising high rate of return with no risk. And people fell for it. And anytime someone markets like that, it's a scam. This is why I think it might have been a scam from the beginning, because you can't market like that. But they did. And that always should give you a red flag if someone promises you something. Someone's promised you a guaranteed rate of return, especially, and they add in no risk. This is a scammer shortcut. Scammers know that people will fall for that. That's why the government regulates this. It's no different than like diet pills. Right, we've been hearing the same. I'm in my just turned 50, and diet pill ads have been around since I was a child, and it's always like, take our pill. You don't have to exercise, you don't have to change how you eat, and you take our pill, and you'll get skinny and become a supermodel. And that advertising's been working, and it works I think it works on the same part of the brain. It shortcuts people thinking, because darn well, if I said to you, hey, I'm going to make this pill and you can lose weight and you don't have to exercise.
Isn't that called methamphetamine?
Well, yeah. Okay, never mind. Wrong analogy. But that's not marketed as a diet pill. It just kind of ends up that way, right?
Well, they named it other things when it was legal to sell it.
Right. So I think what ends up happening is these guys, so I believe that this was designed from the beginning to be a scam. And then you look at how they set up their offshore accounts were very detailed, very elaborate, but their internal monetary controls were very, let's just say, lax. So I put those two things together, and I think they were a scam from day one.
Do you think possibly, I'm just thinking outside the box for anyone listening, but do you think possibly it had a two-pronged approach where one, it funneled money back into, one, made them wealthy, two, funneled money back into their political compatriots, and three, gave Bitcoin a bad name at the same time, which is all motivations of our current administration would be happy with.
So this is where I deviate with a lot of conspiracy theory, right? Because it's hard to read someone else's mind to know their true motivations. And so you're asking me to speculate on what they were thinking. I don't know. I honestly just don't know. I don't think anybody can know. And so I think if I look at how they structured things, and they structured things to be able to do illegal, bad things. That's how they structured it. And so, and they promised, and they did the typical scammer marketing. And so do I believe that they were doing a 3-prong CIA level takedown kind of scenario where they were trying to discredit Bitcoin in some way? In fact, I think it's done something the opposite, though. I think it actually reinforces decentralized cryptos like TUSC and like Bitcoin, because we weren't affected by it. And it really kind of pushes us back into decentralization, and decentralized finance makes more sense, because this isn't, this was a centralized exchange, right? When you put your money on their exchange, they controlled your crypto. And there are those of us over here going, not your keys, not your crypto. You have to, we always tell people you should never leave your crypto on an exchange ever. You should always self-custody. You want to buy crypto, go buy crypto, bring it back to a wallet you control. Don't leave it on the exchange. And that's been like this cardinal rule that we keep saying to people over and over again. And I think, if anything, this makes a better case for decentralized exchanges over centralized exchanges, which is what they were.
But Bitcoin seems to have had a pretty severe drop after this happened. Do you think
it's holding it around 16.5 right now? I think people are a little worried that there's one or two more dominoes that may drop, because it seems like a lot of centralized finance players in crypto have been, let's just say, emperor have no clothes. They've been doing a lot of dirty stuff. And so, but I've also suspected personally, where like Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin next year could go down even to like 10 or 12,000 because of the economy in general.
Give me a minute. I've got to console Dave here now that he heard that. Dave.
Well, the lower Bitcoin goes, the easier it is for me to buy it, Jared. I'm not worried about that.
I will say that, I bought the dip. So I actually bought more Bitcoin recently, because I didn't think it'd go this low again. So I think it's going to pop. I don't think Bitcoin's going anywhere. I'm a big believer in two projects, TUSC and Bitcoin. Those are my two babies. And so, no, I think it just shows that, Bitcoin is strong. And I think other cryptos that are legitimately run, that are not hype-based Ponzi schemes, I think will come out of this stronger. Now, is the government going to try to use this as an excuse to somehow regulate decentralized finance when centralized finance is the problem? Probably, because politicians are all scumbags, and they want to like go through and take any opportunity and tragedy and use it for their own political gain. I also think that there's a lot of politicians that have a lot of egg on their face, and Gary Gensler, who's in charge of the SEC, was buddies with Sam Bankman-Fried. They were having private meetings, and apparently he missed this somehow. So it'll be interesting to see what the fallout is.
Do you think that could also be why Mr. Fried is out walking free and clear, because he was friends with the head honcho there?
I don't want to make accusations, but it doesn't look good.
If you can walk into a building in January 6th and end up in solitary confinement for years, and then do this and get no penalty on your existence, other than some fluff pieces in the media.
Well, they committed.
What does that say about
January 6th was a crime committed against the Democrat Party, against the party that's in control of the media. Remember, it was worse than Pearl Harbor, worse than 9/11. I heard all those things. They told me.
And this was a crime committed for the Democratic Party. So totally different.
Now it sounds like they also gave some money to the Republican Party as well.
You would have had
not anywhere near as much,
like 6% of money given to the Democrat Party. But I mean, of course, there's a few Republican candidates that the Democrats really like. Maybe that's where it went, but
yeah, I think it's like anything else. They were bribing the people they wanted to bribe, but who knows? All I know is that this is a huge crime. Like 1 million people lost a lot of money.
That's a lot of people.
And they might be angry. And here's the thing, right? And right when this was breaking, like several hundred million allegedly got, right after they declared bankruptcy, there was like several hundred million that got hacked. And it's like, okay. And no one's questioning this, because Sam Bankman-Fried's like, oh, we got hacked, and all this money just moved from all these different wallets that they controlled. Several hundred million. And it's interesting because everybody's calling it a hack, and no one in the media, the mainstream media, is even questioning that, because SBF said, yeah, it was hack, or it looks like it was a hack. I'm like, he's just consolidating money for his getaway. And I think he's an incredible flight risk. He's got access to a lot of crypto, whether it was stuff he's borrowed, stolen, hacked, whatever you want to call it.
Or even bought,
But
sure, still, but he's a flight risk.
he's a huge flight risk, and he's still not arrested. In fact, I think it's the New York Times has a big speaker thing next week, and he's still speaking at it. So he's going to New York or something for some big highfalutin event where he's going to be speaking, and people are like, really? So maybe they're going to arrest him. I don't know. I don't know what's happening, but to me, even the Bahamian police, because have not arrested him, and none of that makes any sense.
Didn't he buy off the Bahamas? I had heard that. Okay, this is what I heard. I heard the Bahamas are fairly strict on their banking compliance. I've heard that they get a bad rap because they don't work well with the United States on their, like if the United States demands information on people that are banking there. But I heard that the Bahamas demanded from him something, $20 million, and he paid it and essentially bought his freedom down there.
So apparently this is where it gets a little dodgy, because we're hearing some of this information from Sam Bankman-Fried himself. Right? The hack was something he said they were hacked. Okay, but we don't know. But it was obviously awfully weird timing for a hacker to only hack them right after they declared bankruptcy, and it's getting bad, right? But yes, apparently the government of the Bahamas had seized a bunch of crypto and some other stuff from FTX and Alameda, because they're supposed to protect it for holders potentially in the bankruptcy. But yet Sam Bankman-Fried himself has not been taken into custody, not by Americans, not by the Bahamas government. So again, if I were a government in the Bahamas, I would be awful worried that he would be a flight risk off my island and give us a big black eye and make them look really, really corrupt. So I would think they would want to take him into custody to just offset that kind of image that people are going to have about him.
Yeah.
But then you combine that with the media coverage of this. They're just, major media outlets are literally giving him a free pass. It's like, they won't, in these pieces, they're not even using the word scam, fraud, anything. They're not talking about it. They're just talking about poor Sam,
poor Sam
Bankman-Fried.
Apparently he has tweeted, "I'll be speaking with Andrew Sorkin at the Deal Book Summit next Wednesday, 11/30th." So yeah, he's going to a summit, and that's the one being held in New York.
Yeah, no,
by the New York Times.
Yeah, and so that's, I don't know, shouldn't he be in jail? Maybe on bond or something. But yeah, he feels comfortable that after all this, that he still can just travel the United States and speak publicly, and he didn't do anything wrong. That also speaks, he's probably a narcissist, which also makes a lot of sense, but I don't know. I can't fathom what's happening right now.
Well, we will find out on the 30th if he's a narcissist, or maybe we have a corrupt system and they were right on January 6th. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in this.
How long did it take for him to arrest Madoff? They had him within, I think it was in like 36 hours. He was in cuffs.
Yeah, but Madoff got away with it for decades.
Yeah, but
but no, then, but
not to this. Also, this is more money than Madoff had too.
No, I think Madoff was 50 billion over decades.
Okay.
Yeah, but Madoff, they apparently were looked at by the government, apparently audited. Everybody looked a blind eye to Madoff too.
Oh, really?
And yep. And so it's not as big as Madoff. It's pretty big.
So what caused them to finally go after Madoff?
I think he ripped off the wrong person. I think that's ultimately there's lots of comments out there about it, but he apparently was ripping off the wrong people, and people figured it out. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I hope that if he comes to the United States, he gets taken into custody and arrested. But given the way he's not been arrested yet, that the government he hasn't even asked for. I mean, there hasn't even been a charge from our own government. There hasn't been an extradition request, as far as I know. And so, in a case like this, there would almost always be an emergency, kind of something, right? Because he is such a flight risk.
Do you think that not because it's a political connection, but do you think maybe because this is something on the cryptocurrency exchanges where our government's like, we don't even have established laws on how to bank cryptocurrencies yet, or they're ignoring it under that guise?
I mean, they understand. The government sees so many Bitcoin, they know how to custody it. Like they auction off Bitcoin all the time that they see. So, I mean, they know how to do that. And understand these aren't even crypto laws, right? These are just straight up fraud, wire fraud, misappropriation of funds, securities fraud. There's lots of these laws that are very well established that apply. This isn't even like a gray area. Like you would not do the things that they do in any kind of situation where you custody assets for other people or money or what have you. You would never be able to do the things that they did and get away with it because it's pretty much illegal practices globally.
Where he's in the Bahamas, would that give him some cover on that?
So the U.S. government indicts foreign nationals that have never stepped foot into the United States all the time. The SEC will do enforcement action against people that sell securities to Americans, even if they've never been here. FTX had many Americans deposited funds. They used to say that you couldn't, but they were able to, people were Americans. Lots of Americans had funds there. And they also marketed to Americans. And so if you look at a lot of naming of the stadium and all these other things, they were running commercials. They were running commercials in America. And so the SEC has proven numerous times or already used that as the fact that, even if you say you weren't, allowing Americans to wink nod to set up accounts, you're actively marketing to Americans. And so that gives our government nexus or jurisdiction. And so that happens very routinely. So that's not even an issue. And apparently some of their businesses, they had I've heard over 120, 130 different businesses, and several of them were based in Delaware. So they had some subsidiaries that were based in the United States. So there is definitely clear nexus. They did file bankruptcy in the United States. So I think the jurisdiction isn't an issue.
And no Hunter on the board?
No Hunter on the board?
He probably had FTX on his laptop.
Delaware.
Oh,
he's already there. Let's face it, I'm sure he could have bought his underage prostitutes with crypto as well. Obviously not though, because if he'd have put his crypto into FTX, they were spending it on their prostitutes.
I'm glad to see that the Democrats are actually involved with crypto, though. That means it's a pretty solid project.
Right?
Yeah, because the Democrats are always involved with things that have, potential for success.
Yeah, I don't think this, I think there's been a lot of people that are, I think they're trying to say this is the end of crypto and crypto's all dying and everything else. And I don't think that's the case at all. Technology is not going anywhere. In fact, to me,
that concerns me that this was used as something to destroy crypto, to take confidence away from it.
I think they're trying to distract from it right now. And I think anytime a politician can distract you and say, hey, look over here, they don't want to say, hey, look, we were buddies with this guy and we got money from this guy. They don't want to talk about that.
Obviously.
And that's what I have to wonder about. Are they trying? I think right now you have a lot of important people and a lot of important lawyers and a lot of politicians having a lot of meetings on how to play this, because what we don't know is what bodies are buried under all this. And I mean, if you start digging below the surface on the SBF thing, what do they have on people? Like if they were clear, like for instance, if maybe they were doing illegal embezzling of taxpayer money, right? That's a whole other level, right? If that taxpayer money going to Ukraine worked its way back, that's a whole other level of corruption, right? And that's going to go against one party. I mean, that stuff can nullify. I don't know if it ever would, but I mean, that can affect, previous elections and undo things and get a lot of people in trouble.
I mean, yeah, it'd be crazy if you found out the Democrat Party was spending your money irresponsibly.
Or any party, they all do it. But so the thing is, I'm going to bet right now the reason he's not in custody is I think a lot of people are concerned that either SBF himself or SBF and his family have a lot of dirt on other people, and they want to evaluate how much they can punish him and without revealing too much dirt. I'm going to bet that's probably what's happening, and they're stalling for time to figure that out because I think there's dirt. And, I bet he's going to get a slap on the wrist. This is my feeling. I think he's going to get off the hook. I think they might try to put, there was some other, like the Carolyn Ellison. We don't know anything about her. No one knows where she is. She's not talking. No one has any clue where she is right now.
So she's the smart one.
And they sound like they're blaming her for everything.
I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to throw someone else under the bus in that group. There was a couple other cohorts, folks. None of them are talking. SBF is the only one out there talking. But he comes from the most politically connected family of any of the others. So yes, it wouldn't be surprised if SBF throws Caroline or somebody else under the bus under this. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a slap on the wrist. And I think that's what many of us are really concerned about, is that he's going to get away with it.
Well, I mean, he needs to be careful what he talks about. I mean, if he mentions the Clinton name in the wrong circumstance,
he could commit suicide.
People end up committing suicide by shooting themselves in the back with a 12 gauge all the time under the Clintons' watch. It's crazy.
I posted a hashtag SBF didn't hang himself.
Yeah.
I put that out there already. So
yeah, well, that is true. There's been a couple of people under the Clintons' friend group who have hung themselves and shot themselves with a shotgun
at the same time.
These people, well, that's the question. They were found hanging with a shotgun wound. So it'd have to be at the same time, because one does not shoot oneself in center mass with a shotgun and then still have the diligence to be able to hang yourself.
You must have been really depressed.
But here's the thing, Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, but we still don't know who the donor or who was on their list.
I know it's pretty wild, that, isn't it? It's almost like they use the force of our judicial system to have a trial that covers that up.
Prince Andrew lost all his rights as a royal, but he's still not in jail.
He lost his title.
Right.
He still lives high on the hog.
Sure.
He doesn't get
to wear the fuzzy uniform.
No more bling bling.
Right. And so he doesn't get to go to the parties, all the parties. So I think this is the problem. I am really concerned that I think he's going to get away with it or just get a slap on the wrist. Right. And that's why I think he's still going to that New York Times thing. He's just going to pretend like he didn't do anything wrong. And he's going to make the case. And people are like, oh, poor Sam. It was those other people that led him astray, kind of stuff. That's my concern.
He's leaning right into it. He's leaning into it and molding it. And you said he's a smart guy, so
I think he's a smart guy that have probably the best attorneys in the world advising him through his parents right now. And my understanding, his family members were there in the Bahamas. So he is absolutely being counseled on what to do. Nothing he says or does at this point is, an accident. It's going to be very intentionally done. And understand, if he shows up, he's like, look, I'm not running. I'm going to, other people ran. Apparently, people were speculating that Caroline Ellison went to Dubai or somewhere where they may not have jurisdiction in the United States. It looked like clearly she ran, and no one knows where she is. And so it was speculated that she was going to Argentina or Hong Kong or Dubai. But no one knows. She hasn't tweeted. She's not out there. We don't know where she is. So I think she fled, is what I'm thinking already.
Could I play devil's advocate real quick? Could it be possible that everyone that ran did this under his nose and he didn't know about it?
Is it possible? Sure.
And that all of his family's property buying and all that was all on the up and up.
It's possible. And the thing is, he, like, just before the bankruptcy, he took out a personal $1 billion loan from Alameda. So Sam Bankman-Fried has got a personal $1 billion loan or something himself. So understand there was a lot of weird,
making it sound very possible anymore. But, yeah,
I'm just saying is, there's a lot of things here that we don't know. It's still, I would still consider this an unraveling or breaking story. And there's a lot of information we don't have yet. Again, the forensic accountant guys are over there. That CEO guy, John Ray's over there. He's trying to figure it out. And it'll be very interesting the longer they're over there digging through the documents of what they have. I have a feeling they're going to probably do a lot of chain analysis kind of stuff to try to track a lot of these flows of, crypto and cash and things running around. I'm going to be surprised. To me, let's just say you did it, right? Let's just assume I'm going out there. I'm pessimistic that this was a deliberate fraud. And if that were the case, and you literally even had $600 million or $1 billion in crypto and money stashed around, I would have run, because that kind of money you can live the rest of your life very, very well. But SBF didn't. And he's like 30 years old. So he's literally facing decades behind bar. I mean, at least, maybe 15, 20, 30 years, depending on what they end up charging him with and what he gets found guilty of. So you're talking the best years of his life behind bars. He didn't run. Not only that, he's still going to go do public engagements. He would not, and don't tell me his very, very politically connected, very wealthy family who is advising him is not in contact with him and orchestrating these moves or advising him on these moves. They feel comfortable and confident enough that this is the right move for him, is to continue acting like everything's fine. Like, I'm not guilty of anything. The fact is, one of his other, co-founders, left over the summer and bought a boat. We don't know where he is. We don't know where Caroline is. I have a feeling those people are not as politically connected, and I don't think they're going to get off. I think what you're probably going to have is, you're going to have somebody else be the scapegoat, and they're going to try to position him as the innocent doofy guy who, can just he just didn't know any better. And they're going to throw some of those other people under the bus. That's what I think is going to happen. Otherwise, there's no way that he's just walking around acting like business as usual. He wouldn't do that. That doesn't make any sense unless his lawyers, his mom and dad lawyers, told him to do that.
Well,
to make it look like he's not guilty.
They've also got their friends in the media helping him with that coverage too. Because look, anybody who thinks the New York Times or NBC, we don't even have to talk about CNN and MSNBC, NBC, any affiliates under Disney, so ABC and that. We all know that they're, let's just say, ultra friendly to the Democrat Party. And so they're pulling coverage for him. And if this has a political tie to it, such as his parents are one of their biggest donor bundlers, the Democrat Party's going to protect that, as I think the Republicans would on their end.
Well, the thing is, you have people that, you have a lot of politicians, even look at it like this. Maybe they just don't want to be embarrassed, because it's not only that there was political donations going around, like tens of millions of dollars. He was the only bigger, the donor to the Democratic Party was Soros. He's number 2 under Soros. So There's a lot of people that just don't want to be get caught with their pants down, and they're just going to try to cover up that, whatever that loose association might be, right? There's embarrassment. So politicians are going to like, oh, well, let's just try to make, this is not going to go well if they can pin this on us. So we got to make SBF, he's still just a good guy that lost his way and made a mistake and shouldn't have trusted that evil girl. So, and then the fact that Caroline took off makes her look guilty. So if she took off first and you want to be conspiratorial, maybe you told the other people, yeah, you take off and I'll take off later. And then he just sat there, let them take off, makes them look like they're running. And then he's like, oh, I'm going to go do my normal things, right? Because that's what the lawyer told me to do. So I think that's my conspiracy on this, is I think they're going to throw the other people under the bus.
If he was going to do that, wouldn't it make more sense to actually disappear her and then make her out to be a runner?
I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I guess, I don't know. We don't know where she is now.
I mean, if you got that kind of money, how hard would it be?
I mean, if you're throwing there's a lot of chance if you're having someone offed. They
that
find
would look
that
more
body.
Suspicious.
Yeah, where if you let them go and build their life and hide, but here's the thing. Let's say if he's the one that the Democrat Party donations came through, and he sticks around and they get the rest of the world convinced that he's a dope. Because if it found out that he fraudulently donated money to the Democrat Party, would the party then have to return that money? But if he gets found to be a dupe that was innocent, would the party be able to then keep that money?
Yeah, I don't know what the FEC's rules about that would be. I would think they would have to return the money, but and why I would say that is that if they can prove that it, I don't know. Do I think they're going to give up the money? I mean, it might be subject to clawbacks, right? So there's this concept. So if there's a fraud, for instance, and even with the bankruptcy, right? If you go and do a bankruptcy and, hey, we're going to go out of business, and then you tell all your buddies to take their money out and your family to take their money out, and then you declare bankruptcy, the government will go back, and I think I don't know what the time period is. It's a couple months, I think. They can go back months and do what they call a clawback, and then force the people that took the money out to give it back because it's owned by the bankruptcy estate. So I don't know how that would apply to campaign donations, because the campaign spent that money typically. So it's like,
yeah.
I don't know how that works. But do I think that politicians are ever going to give the money back? No, probably not.
Well, it's not just that. I think what I'm asking is, would him being found innocent, and if all the money going to the political campaign went through him, could that pull cover for the political campaign to where they could say, oh, that money that came in here was separate from the fraudulent stuff?
Well, if they don't, probably if they just say it was bad luck and they ran the business into the ground, but they didn't do anything criminal.
Well,
it's going to be a bankruptcy.
It's too bad he didn't come out and say, hey, I don't like what schools are doing, or sell whole milk. I mean, he would be arrested. Wasn't there that preacher who held up a sign that said abortion is wrong, and they raided his house with the SWAT team to arrest him? So he did all the things that apparently were legal nowadays in the United States, and none of the illegal ones, like speech.
Too big to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ultimately, the rich and politically connected have a different set of rules, apparently, than the rest of us.
Yeah. But that's always been that way. Been that way forever. It's never going to not be that way.
That's sad. And I think that's really sad.
Yeah, it is. It's very sad. But
I just hope that the people that lost their money get something back out of it, hopefully. But they pissed the money away, a lot of it, and they stole a lot of it.
Let's face it. If you lost your money to a banking scam and you expect the judicial department to recover it for you, it's not going to happen. Because our justice system is designed to enrich the government. It's not designed to make you whole again.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a whole other show, isn't it?
Yep.
But like I said, I just want to reemphasize with this is that this is not a crypto problem. This is not a crypto that somehow like Bitcoin failed in some way. This is just sheer fraud. And very politically connected fraud.
I agree completely. I have faith in cryptocurrency. Well, okay. I have more faith in my faith in cryptocurrency is that some of it can't be inflated. That's my faith in it. I'm wondering if part of this wasn't to make, because I do go to the conspiracy theory, I'll admit it. If part of this wasn't to make crypto look bad, so that people who are crypto positive start requesting to have that Fed controlled crypto show up, so they can still have, crypto light or whatever you want.
Sure, I'm sure they're going to jump on the opportunity to badmouth cryptocurrency. I'm sure, but I don't think this whole thing was set up just to make a bad publicity piece for cryptocurrency. They want to look for opportunities to make crypto look bad, and this is going to be one of them. I'm sure. I mean, those people that sit on the fence, they see this and they're like, "Oh wow, crypto can get hacked." So,
well, yeah, I think, think about the risk they're taking too, right? Like this is obviously, a stain to the DNC, right? There's obviously a stain to political connections with the SEC, the regulators themselves, and SBX. I don't think they would risk, and we don't know what that fallout's going to be yet, right? We're still in the dark, and we don't have all the information yet. And so I don't think they would risk that for the other. Because this, unless they're literally trying to clean house internally, but this rises all the way to the top of the party. So I don't think they would do that intentionally. I think there's a lot of risks that could go the wrong way. But I think I agree with David. I think they like to take advantage of any situation that they can, and they're going to try to spin it any way that they can.
My concern is for this girl and those other people who have just disappeared. I'm thoroughly convinced that the Democratic Party has the capability to make people disappear. And if that is the case, I mean, this would be like one of those Murder, She Wrote kind of stories, but bigger. I mean, these people just disappear and they're the bad guys, never to be heard from again. And Sam gets to walk away with his $1 billion loan and just drink margaritas on the beach for the rest of his life.
Well, remember, we still don't know who has the hacked crypto. So either. So there's a lot of things here that are very, very interesting. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens after next week, after they speak, and see if he possibly gets arrested, which would be, I think, ideal. But even if he gets arrested, I'll be surprised if he doesn't get off very, very, very lightly.
Do you think maybe they're giving him the leash to see what he, to see if maybe they find these other characters who have disappeared, or to see if he'll say something in these public engagements that they can then use in proceedings?
I think what they're going to do is I think he will be taken into custody at some point, because I don't think there's too many people talking about this. I don't think he'll ever step foot I don't think he'll ever go to trial. He's going to take a plea deal, and it's going to be like 5 years in a country club prison somewhere, or 5 to 8, and he'll be out in 3.
That would be a good deal.
Well, Florida had that country club prison for Epstein. Maybe that room is still open from his. That
was in New York, wasn't it?
No, it was in Florida.
You look at the Theranos lady who just got charged. Yeah. She got 11 years for how many couple $100 million or whatever it was. But she won't spend 11 years in jail for that. She'll spend a couple of years in a white collar prison and get out.
Yeah. Did she go in on that on a plea, or did she go through the full trial?
She pled. They pled. These are all plea deals. No, actually, I think she was found guilty. I don't know. I didn't follow that case super close, but she just got sentenced to 11 years. But I understand these are white collar crimes, so they're never going to go to like a Supermax or something. It's always going to be a minimum security country club type thing anyway, just because of the nature of the crime. And typically you get out in good behavior. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do arrest him, that they're going to offer him a really nice plea deal. He's going to pin it all on the other parties and blame them, and the media is going to support it, and he's going to get away with it.
And the girl will never be heard from again.
That'll be very interesting to see what happens. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes a plea and then turns on his other partners like her. And then, so I don't know.
Well,
we'll see.
They gave him the opportunity by running.
That's kind of what I'm thinking is like, if they ran or are not around, right? And he just is pretending like he's a good old boy and he's still walking around and going to do public engagements and just says he's sorry and not my fault. And doop, I'm just, kind of a dumb, goofy guy. And I just wanted help too. I wanted to help save the whales and whatever else he wanted to do, he's acting normal. And so they'll say, look, he wasn't running at all. He had the opportunity to run and he didn't. But these other people, they ran. And so it's their fault. They were the ones that are hiding stuff from him because he wasn't that smart. He trusted them. It's going to be stuff like that.
And if you think about it, 5 years in a country club prison, and then you get out and you just access your crypto and go wherever you want. I mean, it's a better strategy than I've got going on in life. I'm going to work for the government for 30 years. And I'll be lucky if I walk away with anything. But if this guy does 5 years in prison, he gets to just walk out with his crypto addresses.
Yep.
And there's nothing anyone can do about it in reality.
Well,
correct.
Sounds like he bought a lot of property with his family, so he might have more than just his crypto assets.
Well, yeah, that stuff could be seized, but his crypto, I'm sure he keeps that safe.
Not if they bought it in foreign countries.
But here's the thing, right? Like, if this was planned to be a scam, they prepared along the way, is what I bet. They probably put stuff away. But I don't know. I mean, that's my own opinion. I don't have proof of that. But if it was a scam, but I think there was some intention to be a scam from day one, based on how they marketed and how they set up these organizations. And I think that if you are going to be a scam, and these aren't stupid people, and I don't care what the media wants to say or how they try to spin him, there's just naive, a super smart genius who's naive and doesn't get it. I think what you're going to see is, they probably padded the nest.
Do you think that, is it possible that the hack could have happened and could have been one of the people that jumped ship?
That's a good question. I think that what he called a hack is probably somebody who had access to the wallet. So you got to remember, you can't move crypto if you don't have access to the wallet. Mm-hmm. All right, that's how crypto works. And so all of a sudden you're telling me they've been using these accounts for, years, and they must have a way to figure out key management and who there is going to have access to those keys and those wallets. And so it's if it was quote unquote, it wasn't a hack. And I hate when they say it was hacked, somebody had access to the keys and moved crypto around in the height of this stuff coming into the news cycle. So you tell me, if somebody had to have the keys and they were, all of a sudden somehow their keys were compromised some way. I don't believe that. I just don't. I mean, they're going to have that stuff on hardware wallets, I would bet. And which would make it not only you would need the keys, but you'd have to have access to some, like a Trezor or Ledger or some kind of hardware wallet. So yeah, I don't believe it was a quote unquote some outside hack. I think if somebody had access to the funds and moved it. And the question is, who is that and who currently controls it? And we have no way to know unless somebody starts siphoning it off and trying to like push it into, liquid money somewhere and cashing out to have cash. So, I mean, ultimately, either what you're going to want to do is move that stuff to Monero or move that stuff to cash. If I were going to be doing that and I was going to be a scam and all that, you're going to want to be able to get it into cash. You're going to want to get it into Monero so it can't be traced. And every time you go through another exchange or cross one blockchain to another, or if you go through a swap site or something like that, you're breaking it, and you're breaking when you break the chain, right? Literally when you chain hop, or going into and out of an exchange and stuff like that. You just make it harder for people to follow it and trace it. And so that'll be interesting to see where that money goes or gets moved to in the next few weeks.
Has technology advanced to the point where we can track Monero transactions, or is that still an obscured coin?
Not officially. If a government has the ability to figure that out, it's not public information.
The future of the Democratic Party is crypto.
Maybe. But
you're going to have to get a different hat that says blue and says you deplorable or something.
It'd be called, you just call it blue hat and called it, effective altruism.
Yeah. Keep America the same. I did that.
At this point, I'd like to keep it as same as possible because it seems like we're going the wrong direction pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I'd like to keep it the same because we're in a wrong direction. And there's no innocent party in this. There's no innocent political party. They both have been there the whole time.
So they all suck.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I look at it like this as the best. I look at it, we're so broken that the best you can do is Trump and the best you can do is Biden as your candidates. We're already screwed. Because we should be able to do a lot better than those two. And that's what it's looking like it's going to be.
There's only 370 million people. I don't know what you expect. I mean, we can only drum up two people. That the problem is the people who want to do it are all people that shouldn't have that. And
I have a theory on this. I actually think that the people that want to be in politics or work in government are typically narcissists that want power over other people, because most normal people, rational normal people, don't want to just sit there and control other people.
No.
If you think about even where you work, right? The manager that's on a power trip, right? That really wants to, push his weight around, or the people that join an HOA just to be bossy and be nasty to their neighbors, right? Those kind of people I would argue, are psychos, and a certain percentage of the population are these psycho narcissists that want that job. I would say this at this point. I spent a lot of time in politics over my life and working around politicians. And my opinion is I've never met a politician that I felt didn't have some of that narcissism going on, and there wasn't something a little off about them. I don't think normal people want that job. Good people that make good decisions don't want to lie to people, because it's not hard to get elected. You just got to be willing to lie to everybody you meet and tell them exactly what you want to hear. A good politician, all they do is they're really good at reading people. They're like the magicians on stage. They can do a cold read where they can instantly kind of read you. Like if I saw you in public, and I ran for Congress, so it's like I kind of understand this. I see you wearing a flannel shirt, got an American flag hat, probably a hunter, probably a conservative. I'll be telling you, man, guns, they're my thing. And just instantly you meet someone and you just start like going, I look at your car, you're driving a truck, you're almost always conservative. And then conservatives put the bumper stickers on the back. You can read people's politics based on that. The bigger the number of bumper stickers on someone's car, whether they're right or left, the more passionate they are. Mm-hmm. So if you see these, they got the lefties got the Namaste and the Feel the Burn stickers, and they're all over their car. Right. And then the conservatives have like 15 different like Gadsden, kind of things. And so if you understand the things to look for, it's easy to bullshit people to make them think that you're one of them.
So Rob, if I decide to run for Congress one day, I shouldn't go to retirement homes and talk about how Social Security is going to be, I don't know, ending shortly under my reign.
No, what you should be doing is telling them how much you appreciate them being the true fabric of America, and you're going to do everything to make sure that the money they put in, that they get it.
Gotcha.
And you're going to protect that because they put into Social Security.
It was an
and
investment.
That's what you tell them. And by the way, older people tend to vote more. So typically you want to go after the baby boomers and the seniors and tell them. But here's the thing. I'm just being straight up honest. If you can read people and kind of gauge people pretty well, and you just know what they're going to want to hear, it's not hard to get elected because people just want to vote for people they agree with.
Yeah.
And
no,
that's why
no,
it's so insidious. And politicians are really good at that.
I'm with you 100%. Yeah. I just see politics as people running to make their political enemies pay. And that's people who vote also. People, I don't vote. I'm apolitical. I'll vote locally. I don't vote beyond my county. And it's people who are running, let's say on a state level. People run to vote to make their, neighborhood political enemy or their statewide political enemy. And nationally, it's just ridiculous. There's no common sense or rhyme to it. Why is abortion a national conversation? Anybody explain that to me, how abortion fits into any kind of national welfare system on either side? Doesn't do anything for our national security.
I would contend that why is abortion ever an issue? Because no one's ever going to agree on it. It's just going to make people fight. And, you can't solve these issues. And here's the thing, right? Like complex social issues can't be solved by government. None of them. And not at the state level, not at the federal level.
He just ruined my day, Jared. Forever changed.
Yeah. The problem is that we want to vote for politicians that want to control. A lot of people want to use government to control their neighbor's behavior.
Yeah.
Or control what color they paint their house, or, whether or not.
That's like the HOAs. Yeah.
And so when you understand that, I think the problem is not, I actually think that our culture is tainted, and that's the problem, because politics is downrange of the
downstream
culture.
From culture.
And our culture's tainted, because if we think it's okay to vote to use government against our neighbors, we're already toast. We're already screwed.
I would argue that culture is the absence of government. You can't create culture in a government because but the politics gets created based as a reflection of the culture.
Well, yeah, let's look at it. I mean, Howard Zinn wrote that book about the evil white man coming over and hurting the noble savage. That infested the colleges, and now our colleges don't produce. Our colleges produce, our whole education produces activism before it produces any kind of excellence. Activism is the number one goal from education system, kindergarten through, at least your general education. Maybe graduate school's different, but the damage is done then.
Well, I think the damage starts much earlier than college. We want to talk about college.
That's what I said. From kindergarten all the way through, it's producing activists.
And I think it's not only producing activists, it's producing people that have low self-esteem. It's producing people that have high anxiety. It's producing people that don't know how to independently operate and how to independently think. And if you send your kids to public school, you're a part of that problem.
That's the theory behind. That's the theory behind public school, going back to the Germans when they started it.
Horace Mann
brought it
Russian
here.
education model.
Yeah, but the Germans started it, and they got it from the Japs.
Actually, the Germans started it because they were trying to create soldiers under the Prussian Empire.
They were trying to beat the original Hitler. I mean, Napoleon.
So yeah, I mean, I homeschool my kids, and there's a reason. I think if you're letting the government educate your kids, you're causing the future to have a problem.
You're handicapping.
And you're going to struggle. You're handicapping your children.
Yep.
And you're handicapping the nation, because the government. People don't want to admit that the conservatives are really bad. Conservatives protect public schools all the time too. And it's like this sacred cow that you can't ever question government spending on education.
Yep. Well, not just that, but also, what else do the conservatives push for? The Pledge of Allegiance. So you go to this government school where they've got this church of the government, where first thing you're going to do is pray to the government and talk about how great it is. And the conservatives back that all the way.
Yep. And they didn't even, it was written, It was written by a socialist to sell
Christian
flags.
socialist.
It was,
Yep.
and they actually great marketing. But that's all it was. The Pledge of Allegiance was designed to sell flags, so they wanted to create a ritual around the flag itself that they could sell to their, the schools to start putting so that ritual means. So if you're going to a school, you should say, hey, we're going to have a big flag in the front of your building, but how do we get a flag in every classroom? Well, there needs to be a ritual that they perform in the classroom, because you could do a Pledge of Allegiance every morning in the gym just in front of one flag. But if you have a flag in every single classroom, now you're selling more flags. I mean, if you look at the history, and the Bellamy salute, and Francis Bellamy. And
what was the original salute when you did the Pledge of Allegiance? Wasn't
it with like your fist in the air or something like that?
It was a Hitler salute.
Another guy did it. He had a goofy mustache. He kind of stole our thunder. I just want to throw that out there.
But yeah, so I think unfortunately though, education's gone downhill for the last 60 years continuously. And I look at it like this: if they say if you send your kids to Caesar to be educated, don't be surprised when they come back Romans. And ultimately, we defend it. People say, well, I can't homeschool, I can't private school. They have all these excuses on why they can't do X, Y, and Z. And people send their kids to these schools and get mad when they come back little, liberals and confused about their sexuality and everything else. But the reality is you're making that choice to put them in that environment. And ultimately, we still have the power in the United States to homeschool or charter school or
pod,
do something else,
or put them in school online. And everyone I know right now who's put their high schoolers in online school, there's been a pretty good chance. I've seen a lot of kids who drown under that system, but I've seen a few kids who have really excelled and turned it around, and are graduating early because it focuses on just what matters. They don't have to go through the indoctrination part that chews up 6 hours of every 7-hour day.
My kids typically have graduated from high school when they're 15 or 16. So, and that's consistent. And I know lots of people that homeschool their kids, and they all tend to graduate from high school a couple of years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, if you think about it, like, why does the government have, so much power over sculpting our kids? And think about it. Your kids are in those classrooms 6 hours a day or what have you. The teachers spend more time with your kids than you do. Mm-hmm. And if you really look at it, most of the time that's the fact. And don't be surprised when those people have this influence. And you look at the people that go into education, and now there's nothing wrong with being a teacher. But if you go and look at the typical person that is a teacher, they're all hard left, and it's not even little left. It's like straight up commie weird left.
Well, I think that's where the matter of fact, Linda, what was her name? I got the book in the other room, Ed School Problems or something. She wrote about that our education school process is to weed anyone that's not ideological sycophant, which she is. She's a hard leftist. But to weed people that aren't ideologically sycophants, it's to weed them out. And they weed them out in college. They go on to become teachers. The other people drop out. And
I've also noticed most teachers are female. Have you noticed that?
Well, that's kind of been an issue forever.
Are they just easier to indoctrinate into socialism, or is it? Why do you think that is?
Well, it's the same. It's the same model that people seek out. Women like to do more nurturing jobs. Mm-hmm. Men like to do more physical and things-centered jobs. Mm-hmm. So it's just like being a nurse. I'm not dogging it, but it's a nurturing job.
Yeah, it's interesting. Medical schools are putting out. I think there's more females in medical school now.
There is.
My wife's a doctor now, or a doctor, and then it's like most of the there's more women coming out of medical schools now, but there's also more men going into nursing. So it's kind of interesting. But even but EMTs and paramedics tend to almost be male dominated. Yeah. It's kind of weird. I was an EMT for a while. I was a volunteer EMT, and it was very male dominated there too.
That might be mostly because of fire departments make up the majority of your EMTs in rural areas and fire departments require a physical pass to get into that. So that may be what causes that that difference still. But yeah, colleges, the only thing where it's still semi on par is like engineering and mathematics.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, but it's like we got to stop outsourcing educating our kids to the government, because and I would say college was very left. I went to college in the 90s, and I went in high school in the 80s. And even when I was in high school in the 80s, I remember certain, like at least maybe a third of my teachers, I kind of could tell they were fairly conservative. And why that was, I think, is that a lot of my teachers were retiring around when I graduated from high school. They were World War II vets.
Mm-hmm.
And I found, being a Gen X person myself, is that I was taught by mostly Gen X. Now, my left-leaning teachers were hippies. They were baby boomers that were my teachers, that were like the real lefty ones, were hippies from Vietnam era.
Mm-hmm.
That were the teachers when I was a kid. The older teachers were Vietnam or were World War II. They were a lot more balanced, a lot more. They tended to be a lot more balanced, a lot more just focused on academics and not so much indoctrination. It seemed to me is that the younger teachers were the ones that were more left leaning, the ones that went through college in the 70s. 60s and 70s. Those were the ones that's where it started, I think. But I noticed even when I was a kid, there were certain teachers that were just always dropping their little comments. Even when I was in college, I was in a physics class in college, and the start of the class. So I'm dating myself, but this was in the 90s. This is when Hillary was trying to get, the precursor to Obamacare was Hillary Care. And I was in a physics class, and literally the teacher was ranting about Hillary Care and national health care for like 10 minutes before the class started. I walked out. But you can't do that in high school.
Yeah. Oh, well, of course, I grew up in Grantsville, in the ultimate of urban cityscapes, So I can't think of any real left-leaning teachers that I had. They were probably there. I think we had a French teacher but he was a nice guy. But yeah, I look back and it was, of course, I wasn't a good student, but I can't think of any left-leaning teachers.
I'm from New York, and I can actually think of the right-leaning ones, but I can't think of any left-leaning ones.
All of them, they were all, middle of the road conservative was your average. Sons of farmers, sons of, things like that.
Yeah, I think I think you'll see a more rural kind of breakdown, because, most people that tend to be hard left don't want to live in rural areas typically. So I think you'll find fewer just kind of self-selecting themselves out from trying to get jobs in those locations. So I think you'll probably see less of it in urban or rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
I think
that makes sense.
Well, I think it's also because urban is left and rural is not. And I think that's because when you live in the city, you have more positive experience with government. The government offers more things. And when you get out to the country, government offers very little to you. And so you don't have that positive engagement with the government, but you still have to send them money every year, which I think that if people from the left do move out to the country, I don't think that leftism lasts too long. At least that pro-government leftism. They might become the anti-government left, but
one of the things I think is the biggest cure is entrepreneurship. I always tell people that write checks to government and have a different view on government than people that just are employees, where it's just taken out of their check and they get a refund at the end of the year or whatever, at the beginning of the year. But I think it's the people that actually have to like literally open up their wallet and write that check, by April 15th. They tend to start thinking, hey, am I getting my money's worth out of this kind of stuff? And
there's a reason why they made it so it was a direct extraction from your paycheck before you even got your paycheck. It's because they knew it wouldn't get paid. They wouldn't be able to raise it above 2%.
Yep. And because people would revolt. But on top of that, most people aren't very good at saving money and then have to just give it to somebody else. I mean, if everybody, so like I'm I'm self-employed, so I have to write a check to government every year. And yeah, that's hard, but I mean, you have to manage your cash flow. I have to, every time I, take a disbursement, I have to put away taxes for that. So I can pay my taxes. But I can tell you, if everybody had to write the check for government, if you got rid of withholding, their income tax wouldn't be a thing anymore. If everybody had to, if you just get rid of withholding from the employers, and then you got your paycheck, and then you had to save that money. The government go broke in the first year because no one would have saved the money, right? They just spend it.
Yeah, and the question is, do you think that it would end because people would revolt, or do you think it would end because people just said, I'm not doing it, and just kind of...
I would say it'd be a combination. I think most people would be broke because I don't think people are good at saving. Okay, so if you all of a sudden you got your full paycheck and you had to manually put away 25, 30% or whatever it is, depending on your tax bracket, and you had to put that away for a year and then write the check to government, most people can't save that. They're just not good with their money at saving like that. They would spend it. And so after the first year, people would be screwed on their taxes, and then they'd be calling for amnesty or some kind of UBI or something. And I think then people would question, whatever it is. The government would try to half the country didn't pay their taxes this year because they didn't have it. We'll give you a whole year's extension or something to come up with that tax you didn't pay us for last year. And I think the weirdness around that, I think people have been eventually go, we need to do something else. This isn't working. I think that's how it would go down. I don't think it would be like people are like, no, we're not going to pay, because that's the case, they just wouldn't pay now.
Yeah. Well, it's like last week we talked to the Democrat Party chair from Davis County, and even she had to kind of take a breath when I explained, you pay 30% of your income to the government. You and usually more, but the average person, it's 30%. And do you get 30% of that value out of them? Do and that's a lot to think about. Where would people be if they got to keep that 30%? Well, there would probably be a lot of failure on the individual level, especially if it went away and you did away with Social Security and that. We'd be looking at a hard 20 years of a lot of failures being exposed on the individual level. But I think people could learn to come around that.
Well, I think the problem is like even with Social Security. So a good chunk of the country has no savings for retirement.
Yep.
And they're 100% going to be dependent on that. So even if you bought them out and say, here's the money we took from you through your whole career, and let's just say you bought everybody out of their Social Security, and how you could fund that is sell off government owned land out in Nevada and Utah and pay for that.
And government buildings,
and the
NSA building could be sold to Twitter for them to fire a lot of people out of it.
Perfect.
I love
it. But what happens then? Okay, people then get this big chunk of money for their retirement, and they get to deal with that. I think a lot of people would spend it, but then you have to have a cutoff and say, okay, well, people after this age don't get that now, and they're going to have to save for their retirement. And how do you get people that can't live? Right now they say 60% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so most people don't even have $1,500 in their checking account in case there's an emergency or something. So how do you take people that are really bad with managing their money and then give them more responsibility by taking away these? So I'm not disagreeing with you that that's the moral or right thing to do. The question is, you're going to have a lot of people on the streets, and you're going to have a lot of crime and a lot of people, failing. And as a society, how do you undo it where you don't leave people literally dying in the cold? I think
Oh, go on.
So I'm saying is, I like to think about, okay, I agree with the idea, like on a very theoretical level, that I don't disagree with you. The question is, how do we get from here to there without having a lot of big body count?
That's what I was saying. We'd have a lot of failure. I think if I was to do it, I would, lean into the 10th Amendment to do it. So I do it on a state by state basis because it's smaller control groups. And I would make it so I'd make it a state-based pension system, where figure out a system so that pensions can be exchanged through states. I would make the cutoff date to where it's, say, someone in, I would go honestly 8th grade right now. If they're in 8th grade or younger, that's when we're going to start educating them with drilling it in their head that you need to save money, you need to hold this off, you need to do that. Also, let's just kick it off. We need to get rid of our tax system and our tax code and our bloated government, at least federally. I would let states come up with their own taxes. I would make it so that no taxes gets paid from the individual to the federal government, the general government. It goes through the states, and the states, that way the states have an argument in there and they can actually protect or harm their people and let the melting pot of ideas happen.
I think you'd have a lot of tent cities. You could do tent cities.
Sure.
I mean, think about that. How much money would you save if I'm a single dude. I live in the compartment of a tent.
Sure.
Bunk row N or something like that.
Sure. But that's on a state level. That's a state argument. But I would do away with the federal side of it, because the federal is on average probably your biggest annual expense.
It certainly is a big one. And I think ultimately none of that's going to be possible unless the USA fails first. I don't think we're ever going to voluntarily go through that. Yep. I just don't think people would want to, because people hate change. People know this system and people know it's unfair, but look at look at COVID. I'll give you a great example. I mean, how many conservatives will say, oh, the public schools are leftist indoctrination centers. All these talk radio clowns are always talking like that. And then during COVID, you had the best possible chance in history to undo the power of public schools through vouchers and all sorts of things. And man, all I heard on the radio was politicians or talk show hosts and right-wing politicians, well, we got to get those schools back open from the COVID. I'm like, no, don't reopen them. This is the best opportunity to get the government out of education ever, because home parents already are figuring it out. They're already being forced to basically homeschool their kids in some way. And just that would have been the best opportunity for conservatives to undo that. And they blew it. They're like, no, we got to put the kids back in school. We got to put the kids back in school.
But the conservatives don't want to undo school.
I know.
They just want to undo the political leanings of the school. But they still want the school. The conservatives still want your tax money. Right.
That's what I'm saying is that. Yeah. So any of these other things are going to be the same way, because, the number one, I mean, if you look at the state level, most of your property taxes goes to schools in most states. The number that's like the biggest budget item for every state in the country is pretty much, it's either going to be government employee pensions like CalPERS in California, or it's going to be education at the state level. Even in Utah, I mean, we spend tremendous amount of money every year on public schools in the state. It's ridiculous.
But it's never enough. Just ask any teacher.
It's never enough, ever. And we spend more on public education now than we ever have in the history of this country. And this kids and the education keeps failing.
Yep. The price goes up and the values go down.
Correct. And so you're not going to undo that. But this is why I think I was really frustrated with, like, during COVID, there was great opportunities to really break up the education industrial complex in the United States and the left-leaning indoctrination centers there, and the conservatives all day long. We got to get the kids back in schools. It's like, okay,
right on point there. Yep.
So, so to me, I don't take any politician on the right seriously about, doing something to change education. I will never take them seriously on the right anymore, because they had an opportunity and all they did is fight to put their kids back in the government hands. And instead of trying to change the system and take advantage of the system and maybe do a nationwide, voucher setup or something, you could have done massive changes then, and they blew it. They blew that great opportunity. The right isn't any better politically than the left. Even when Trump had his first 2 years, right, they had every branch of government. They could have done whatever they wanted. They could have got rid of the, Gun Control Act. They could have, made unmade machine guns illegal, made after 1986, which other Republicans made illegal.
Well, let's go simple. They could have even just taken silencers off the NFA.
You could have done a lot of things.
Just that's a simple one. Every other country on earth
allows suppressors. So it's a hearing aid. It's a hearing device. It's
a safety device. It's a health and safety device.
Lowers the decibel levels.
Protects hearing. But yeah, I mean, but even that, but the thing is, it's about power.
Yep.
And government never gives up power willingly, ever. Politicians never give up power. And, last year's budget will be smaller than this year's budget, and this year's budget will be smaller than next year's budget. And it never changes. And this is my thing is at some point, it just doesn't work anymore. And I think we're getting close to that in the United States. And I'm really concerned about it, which brings me back to crypto, is that we need to get adoption of crypto, like mainstream adoption of crypto for payments and buying and selling. And I keep coming back to that, whether it's Bitcoin or TUSC or something else. We need to get people using crypto not as an investment, but as a means of payment.
I agree.
And
where do we don't? We've got to get places that will accept it as payment, though.
So I think different. I think you got to get people to be incentivized to use it. The problem is Bitcoin, I don't believe will ever be money, because the incentives it's more likely there's a lot of reasons why structurally, I just don't think Bitcoin will be money. It's an investment.
Well, here's the question. Okay. You said not 10 minutes ago, people don't have savings.
Correct.
Which is Bitcoin, unless you're using it as currency, as calorie exchange, is going to be used as savings. And if people don't have savings, they're not going to adopt it. I think we've got to get it to where Bitcoin can be used as caloric exchange without a cost before people will dive into it.
I think it's part of it. I think that's part of the reasons why it hasn't. It's structurally not designed to be good money. Just slow transaction times, inconsistent pricing for transaction fees, long transaction times, inconsistent transaction pricing make it very difficult for it to be used as money. And the fact is, the finite supply cap, actually the artificial scarcity of Bitcoin, is the number one reason why it makes it a really good investment, but a really bad money, because people don't want to spend it. You have to incentivize people to want to spend it. And why would you know? I look at it like this, is why would you, so think of it like this. No one's going to sell Amazon stock to buy gas and groceries.
True.
Because your Amazon stock's going to go up. Well,
True.
Bitcoin's going to go up.
Well, that just,
and why?
All it does is it makes Bitcoin fine art.
Yes, but I think that's what it's going to be. I don't think it.
And,
I think
and that's
can't be.
That's fine. That is fine. I would like to see a cryptocurrency come in that's not fine art, that can shield you from when our government collapses.
You mean like Dogecoin?
So, no, TUSC. So, but the thing is, this is why the supply cap actually is that artificial scarcity caused by supply cap is what makes them better investments, because people hold them because they think they're going to go up in value because of the artificial scarcity. That is also the reason why people are unlikely to adopt it for payments. So when we came up and thought about all those tokenomics. So with TUSC, we don't have a supply cap, but we have a very controlled minimal supply inflation, which is designed to pay the bills, pay for development and marketing and things along the way. But on the other hand, we want people to use TUSC for buying and selling things. We don't want people to buy TUSC and just sit on it. But that's the reason why. I mean, look, I have Bitcoin. There's no way in hell I'm going to use my Bitcoin to put gas in my car. My Venmo, my my credit cards, debit cards work fine for that. I don't have a problem buying gas with other means. Why would I take and sell part of my retirement plan to go buy everyday items? And that's what I view Bitcoin as. But I would do that with TUSC. I would do that with Dogecoin. I would do that with other cryptos. But I think that's the problem. Artificial scarcity created by supply caps is what makes them more attractive as investments and less attractive for people to spend. It doesn't matter. You look at it like this. There's more payment gateways for Bitcoin right now to buy almost anything. You can buy through different credit cards and different gateways. You can buy almost anything you want with Bitcoin right now, and no one does for that same reason.
Can you pay your house payment on Bitcoin?
I think there are some places where you can pay utilities with crypto now. So yeah. And so the thing is, but people just aren't. That's the thing. you look at all these. I've talked to many different stores out there in different industries that have payment gateways up for Bitcoin and stuff, and no one uses them. No one buys anything with them. And I think this is because the incentives are wrong. I mean, it's just the structural incentives of Bitcoin don't lend itself to being money. And that's probably a whole other show we could have.
No,
and again,
I agree with you. I've been screaming that forever, but also that means that Bitcoin is the providence of the upper middle class.
Yep. Absolutely.
And that's it. So that's not something you should even try to proffer to the average person anymore.
I don't, well, I mean, it's like the same thing as like,
it's like selling gold, you know?
Well, it's like, yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same thing with even like mining Bitcoin, right? Everybody's like, yeah, you could just set up a node and mine Bitcoin. I'm like, yeah, but your chances of actually getting anything out of that is almost nil unless you're spending $10,000, $15,000 on a miner that can actually be competitive for the hash. And so, you know, and I'm not anti-Bitcoin, but it's like, you got to understand, like looking at why cryptos haven't been adopted. I mean, I've spent the last couple of years trying to figure that out. And it ultimately comes down to incentives. Bitcoin ended up when they did this SegWit change in 2017, they changed it, you know, and ultimately I just don't think it was designed correctly, for being money. And part of that was when they founded Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto founded Bitcoin, they didn't foresee the rise of ASIC miners that would make the ability for the average person to mine. They didn't take that into account, unfortunately, and that made it so the average person cannot mine Bitcoin. So the mining is very centralized because of that, because the people who have the power to make the miners and to buy the miners are the ones that control that. And that's the downside with a proof of work type of blockchain. There's upsides to it too, but there are downsides. And I think if you're going to objectively look at cryptos, you have to kind of look at the pros and cons. And there are pros and cons to all these different tokenomics, you know, schemes and all the economic stuff. But we'll have to have another show about that.
In the future,
I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, we do have to let you go. We've had you for an hour and a half, but
that would be a good conversation.
Maybe in the future, using Bitcoin as the base measurement and other cryptos as the currency, where Bitcoin would be like gold. We only have this much. This is what it is. And then the other ones operate where their measurement is listed against Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is still like gold, where people buy it and sell it, but they don't spend it.
Gold is for the wealthy, and then the copper piece is for the peasant. And right now, Bitcoin is going to be the representation of the wealthy, and something like TUSC, something like Dogecoin will function for, you know, you want to buy a beer in a tavern.
Yep. I believe that to be true. And we structured Bitcoin with that in mind. I'm sorry, TUSC with that in mind. But again, I'm super bullish on Bitcoin too, long-term as an investment. I think it's a great digital asset. But I think, it's not going to be what people want. And you have to, you know, a lot of people are delusional. They get mad when you say these things, but if you really break it down and look at it, it's just, there's no incentives for most people to use it. And there's more incentives to sit in and hold it and hope that it goes up in value. And I'm one of those people. So
yeah, me too. I haven't spent one of my percentage of Bitcoin.
Well, that's good.
I just watch it, you know, drop in value. No, since I bought it.
One Bitcoin still equals one Bitcoin, though, Jared. Think of the future.
Sure.
I hate when people say that. It's like saying, yeah, well, $1 equals $1.
Yeah, it's all pretend. All right. Yeah, one fairy fart equals one fairy fart.
Yeah, look, yeah, and I got 3 fairy farts.
Yeah. Where one steak is always one steak, because it's something you put in your damn body and nutrients.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Hey, we do have to have you back on, Rob. I'd like to get on and dive in more on cryptocurrency. I'd like to have a good show where you and Dave, I sit here and just ask questions, and you and Dave kind of lay out how people can get into it. If they have crypto, how do they double check that it's secure and safe? Where's your favorite places to hold it? How do you guys use it? Where do you buy it? Things like that.
Sure.
I think that'd be a good one. Because I do know lots of people are interested. Lots of people were interested in it. I haven't heard so much lately.
Well, that's when you get in, is when nobody's asking about it.
Yeah, right now is the time to buy.
Well, buy low, sell high, right? But everybody does the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right now people are scared of it.
Right. That's why you buy it now.
The horse just bucked the last guy off. They don't want to jump on it. But the horse that's tired and was all gentle with the little kid, they want to jump on it and race with that one. I get it. You know, it's people are.
We all know that, but we all know the term buy low, sell high, but no one ever does it. People usually do the worst because of emotion, and they're not disciplined. And they're like, when the price is going down, that's when people start like, oh, I got to cut my losses. And for some things, it is smart to cut your losses. But I think in the case of Bitcoin, I think I'm, like I said, I'm very bullish long term. I've been in Bitcoin for a long time now, and this is just what Bitcoin does. So I have no doubt that it'll be $100,000 within the next couple of years. Probably the next all-time high, it'll break 100,000. Some people are saying 200,000. I don't know. I have no idea.
Our current all-time high is what, Rob?
60, just under 69,000.
Okay. What would the rest of the economy look like if Bitcoin reaches 200,000? What would like the average, let's say, dollar value be like?
Well, you got to remember, so Bitcoin has its own cycles, and some of that's because of the halvenings, and generally so many months after the supply, increase gets halved every 4 years with Bitcoin, and that's part of what Bitcoin does. And so you can kind of look at, they have these wild swings, and you go back over the last 12, 13 years with Bitcoin, and this just is what it does. It does big jumps. It's still volatile. But I mean, from the 2018 high to the 2020 high in those 2 years, I mean, it did a 10x from its bottom. I mean, it went down to almost like 3,000, then went up to 68, right? So, I mean, if you look at it right now being in the 16s, and let's just say it's going to do another 10x on its next all-time high.
Well, what my question is if we're in this inflation game perpetually in the United States, and let's say maybe we don't go Zimbabwe, but we go Weimar Republic inflation, eventually $200,000 might get you a loaf of bread and a Coke.
So in that case, then I would say Bitcoin will probably go up higher.
Yeah. So you think Bitcoin would ride and not evaluate close to the dollar at that point?
I don't have a crystal ball. So I would have to think. So it's like this. If they stop printing money right now, right, the US dollar, because most of the inflation we have right now is just because they're printing too many dollars, and it's increasing the supply of dollars and decreasing the value or the purchasing power of the dollar. So if they just stop printing right now, everything within a couple of years would adjust. Typically, wages don't always adjust, but typically prices will come to an equilibrium of basically that's so saying, think of it like in terms of market cap. All the dollars printed have a market cap. If you add them all together, all the circulating dollars has a market cap. And so that market cap will buy a certain number of goods. And what they're doing is they're increasing the supply of dollars. So the market cap, ultimately, you have more dollars out there, that goes up, but the amount of things they buy stays the same. And so if you stop printing within a couple of years, the dollar will equalize again, and it'll come to an equilibrium of its purchasing power. But they keep printing. This is the problem. They keep printing more and more and more.
They unlock the savings, and savings now used as circulation money. Every time someone gets a loan, that's money popping into existence that didn't exist before that.
So
we're in a mess.
we don't. I think we're in the beginnings of a death spiral of the dollar. I don't think we're going to be able to recover from this. The questions that I don't know are, does the euro die first next year or this winter? And if that does, we might have a bull run.
What about the yuan? What about
that?
What about the yuan and
You got to remember the yuan has its, the Chinese currency. They have their own economics, but they also produce a lot of things in China, and they have a lot of natural resources in China. But if the euro dies, for instance, if it really, really, really inflates, people are going to be flushing their euro-based assets and wanting to go to different currencies and different assets. So I think that could mean that we might get a bunch of people buying dollar-based assets and crypto-based assets if they're leaving and fleeing the euro, if the euro keeps dying. So the euro might die first, which means that the dollar might still hang on for a few more years.
yeah.
And so, there's a lot of these things that we just don't know. We're in very uncharted territory. If they start walking back the interest rates, they might start pumping up the housing market again. And there's a very real chance that they're going to do that. They could also start printing more stimulus money next year. And we already have the state of California taking and doing stimulus money in the state. So there's a lot of these big unknown, and there's a lot of levers they can still pull to kind of keep things going. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do it.
Let me ask you, I'm not very familiar with the ins and outs of the EU, but in the euro, can the individual states in there revert back to their pre-euro, currency?
That's very difficult, but that's kind of
like, could Germany say, okay, we're going to lean on the franc because we can control that, and then delay the EU collapsing? And give those other countries like Italians that start buying francs and try to use it.
So there's complications about that. So for instance, if you want to leave the EU, there's currency. So Britain always kept the pound. And so they didn't really go to the pound, or I'm sorry, they didn't really leave the pound anyway. But if you look at all these other countries, there's in the EU, you got like producing countries that basically are getting money extracted from those countries, and it's getting redistributed around Europe. Germany was one of those countries, but Germany's on the euro. So I think it really depends, right? If you want to like Brexit, where the England, the UK left the EU, right? There was a lot of baggage across with that, but the country. So one of the things that the EU did when they went in, they would go into like a developing country and they say, "You join the EU, we'll build a bunch of new infrastructure for you." So I was there when just after Ireland joined the EU. I lived in Ireland for a while. And they built a bunch of highways in Ireland, and it's under the Maastricht Treaty. Is that part of the rules are if you left, you have to pay it all back. So there's a bunch of rules that if you wanted to leave the EU, they penalized the hell out of the country. So there's all these like treaties that basically made it almost impossible for these, let's say, poorer countries that joined the EU to leave.
Like Greece. Greece is one of the countries that sits on their poor end, and they're kind of insolvent without the EU being there.
Yes, it's all the smaller countries. And so they have the most they would have the most to lose by leaving the EU. Of the bigger countries that are self-sufficient, Germany, France, England, they have the most to gain from leaving.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if your currency hadn't been, but if you're totally dependent on the euro, then converting over, that's a big pain in the ass. So when I was in Ireland, they weren't on the euro yet. They were still on the Irish pound. I still have Irish money, which is kind of cool, but they don't have that anymore. So switching back, switching a currency out like that is really, really it's difficult. So I think depending on what the energy does this winter in the EU, it'll be very interesting to see, where that goes, because I think there's a risk that the EU will fail, and that's going to be good for us short term for the dollar. Long term, I think the dollar's dead, but we'll just have to see.
Wow. Well, I think that's an interesting conversation. I know for monetary issues, it would probably be easier just to parallel your dollar to a cryptocurrency and accept both and just see what happens after that, kind of like what El Salvador is doing. But I guess that's a conversation for another time.
I'd like to see all crypto. Well, I would like to see it to where governments have step away from currency and monetary stuff, except maybe on legality side, on corruption side, and and let businesses like let Walmart accept TUSC or Doge or whatever, let Target accept, Ethereum and let them work it out that way and get money flowing around and defensible from, not that everything's defensible from inflation, but, give us a chance to where the brightest and most well-meaning among us have control of it.
I think having people have more control over their lives is better than less.
Yeah, decentralize.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, everyone. It's Rob. Thank Rob for coming on. That FTX stuff is interesting. Man, that goes deep.
It's a developing story.
I can't wait to see what happens in New York when he comes to speak. Will he be arrested? Will he not be arrested? And will that lady ever be found again? I don't know.
Will it all be memory hold by the media, like so many other things have been?
Keep your eyes peeled.
Jizzy Maxwell was memory hold. They did everything they could. Boom. No longer in the media. The media never came out and going, where's the list? Yeah. Seriously, it's crazy. All right, Rob, have a good night. And
thanks, guys.
We will see you guys next week.